Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Catherine Malmberg. I'm the Director of Public Infrastructure and Strategic Development with the DMC. I'm so excited to see you all here this morning. Thank you so much for making the time to be here with us. And so earlier we heard a lot of really exciting content around the unprecedented nature of this opportunity and the period of growth that Rochester is in. And these next two panels, we're going to kind of bring it down to a tactical level. What are those tools, resources, people available here in Rochester to help facilitate all those great ideas and investments that you all have and are working on in the room? So this first panel, which is composed of some DMC teammates, city teammates, and philanthropic teammates in the community, are going to talk about some of the tools and practices that we have available here in Rochester. And after this panel, we'll then move to introducing you to some other parties that also have tools that could be deployed here but are coming from outside of the Rochester community. And our hope is this is just a taste of what each of these organizations are working on, but you can associate a face with a name and follow up and have deeper conversations after this. So without further ado, I'll let the panelists start us off.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cha Mwatela, and I have the great pleasure of serving the city of Rochester and our community as a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director. Really grateful to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about the city's commitment to equitable development. This morning, we heard a lot about growth and growth and growth. And the one thing that I wanted to pull out of all of that growth is for us to take a moment and acknowledge that historically and even presently, that growth hasn't always been accessible or equitable for all members of our community. That has traditionally not been accessible to women, has traditionally not been accessible or available to people of color, or other folks in our community that might hold different identities. So how, as a city, are we able to acknowledge that? How are we able to sit with it? And how do we move from looking at the numbers that we usually observe in disparities into actual action or items that would impact and create the community that we want to have in the future, a community that engages everyone, a community that has everyone able to grow economically, because we do know that the greatest way to impact all of the social determinants of health that we observe disparities in is in economic mobility. So the three things that I'll cover really quickly, I was told 5 minutes by Wafa, and that's hard for a teacher, is to talk through, one, the policies that the city has committed to that we hope will support economic mobility of WMBE, so women and minority business enterprises. Secondly, how we have prioritized equitable engagement so that communities, as we grow, are moving from being made to do things to participating in how those things are built, whether those are policies or practices or programs. And then thirdly, how do we leverage sources of income and grant opportunities that will allow us to grow a workforce that is diverse? Next slide, please. Thank you. So if you look at this, quick summary, in 2019, Destination Medical Center adopted targeted business goals. And these were very specific to ensuring that communities that typically had not engaged in this space would have an opportunity to do so, but also accountability on our end. So in 2020, the city of Rochester did the same, adopted similar goals. You will notice looking at this that we were intentional when we started this, starting out with projects that were valued at $5 million or above. If they were heavy civil, there was a 4% participation goal. If they were commercial construction, 7%. So as the years go by, you will notice that the value of the projects decreases. That means more and more projects going forward will have targeted business goals, greater opportunities for women and minority-owned businesses to participate in this particular space, allowing businesses that might be small, new, and growing to be able to grow as our community grows. Most folks will ask how this is going for us, and I would like to say, well, looking at this, you'll notice I circled 2024. We're currently at a space where DMC-funded projects and capital improvement projects of the city that are valued at $500,000 and above all have all of these goals. Now, it is not a simple portion. We have someone who manages compliance on this, but we also have a capacity building portion. How do we support DBEs or disadvantaged business enterprises to be able to grow? How do they get certified? How do we make sure that they have access to RFPs? How do they navigate that process so that they can equally participate in the marketplace? The second portion to that, beyond having the goals, is to say, as we have infrastructure projects, how do we engage the people in the community that we're building for? I recently pulled a statistic that said that our Rochester public schools are at about 44% students of color. So we're thinking about the community that is now, but as we heard earlier today, we're thinking about 2030 and 2050 and beyond that. So how are those young people who are going to be the leaders in our community, living in the homes, working in the jobs that we have, how do they contribute to the kind of community that they want to live in? And so we've incorporated community co-design as one of the ways that we make sure that we're engaging all portions of our community, and particularly those that typically haven't been engaged, in providing their perspectives and insights and lived experiences in the type of community that they want to live in. So you'll notice at the top, community co-design varies from traditional engagement. In traditional engagement, we send out a survey, we hear from 1 or 2 people, and then we say, yes, we've got it right. Let's proceed and move forward. Community co-design does a different thing entirely. We have a couple people in our community who have trusted relationships within their community who go out and have additional conversations with everybody that they engaged with and bring that information back. And then we make a decision about a building, a policy, or a process that we're going to incorporate. And we're really excited to have over 15 projects to date that have utilized co-design, and hoping that that will allow us to shape communities in a very different way than we have in the past. Lastly, we've been slightly courageous, I will say increasingly courageous in this space. During the pandemic, we took on a challenge and asked ourselves the question, what is a persistent problem that we want to address in our community? And in that particular time, it was women of color in the built environment. How are they participating? And it was at less than 1%. So went for some grant dollars and applied and asked, how can we best get women of color to get into the built environment? And I'll summarize by saying we utilized co-design, so engaged all of the community, and came up with a program that we have termed Equity in the Built Environment that addresses 4 different areas. 1, how do we introduce young women and young people to careers in the built environment so they can make informed decisions about who they want to be? Maybe they do want to be in this space. Secondly, training and wraparound services for women of color in that space. If they get into industry, how do they navigate that space? What are all of the unwritten rules that they might not know about? And then our industry partner said, we want to be inclusive, we want to be welcoming, we want to hire more folks of color and women of color particularly, but we don't have the competencies required. So how do we provide professional and ongoing development for them? And then lastly, lots of women who said we want to own our own businesses, we want to be developers, we want to be real estate agents. So how do we provide them the support to become entrepreneurs? Happy to say we have about 8 so far who have started their own businesses, some of who are in here today. So summarizing by saying that we're looking forward to a community that continues to be shaped by everyone in our community, and how can private organizations join us in the quest of making sure that all members of our community are engaged in that growth. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chao. Thank you so much for providing this citywide overview of what we prioritize in our work, in development, in housing. My name is Wafa Al Khalifa, and I work for Destination Medical Center as the Equitable Development Coordinator. And as Chao mentioned, several of the initiatives that we have partnered on, one common theme that you could see about our panel is the level of partnership and collaboration that we have between all of us, and how we do our work together in order to grow more housing in our community, grow in more diverse, more equitable, more inclusive ways. What I wanted to share with you here all, as Destination Medical Center is responsible for stewarding $585 million from state of Minnesota starting in 2015 for 20 years. How can we as DMC, be a resource for you, for your development project, for your public infrastructure project. What we prioritize is creating job opportunities. We prioritize creating more housing, more stabilization for neighborhoods, creating more access to transportation. And one of the points that Chow mentioned prior to us partnering on the Bloomberg Philanthropies Mayor's Challenge Equity in the Built Environment program, we did adapt targeted business, targeted workforce, and prevailing wage goals in order to create equitable wealth building in our community. How can we diversify our pool of developers, of contractors, general contractors? How can we diversify our pool of workforce in construction? And as you've heard earlier, with all the opportunities that we have in our community, whether it's Mayo Clinic's Bold Forward Unbound or UMR's expansion, there is a need to think about our future, who lives in our community today, and how can we retain the diverse communities that we currently have, and how can we attract more diversity. Also, other than the equity lens that we like to provide when we're looking at projects that they're seeking support from DMC, we also have sustainability goals. Part of our role at DMC is we would meet with you as a developer, as an investor, and provide you more information, connect you with local resources, connect you with community groups that we have here in order to understand what the community values and prioritize. Also, we work with regional partners like Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, where we hosted the first Emerging Developer Expo last October, because we would love to see more diverse pool of developers in Rochester. And I wanted to share with you a snippet here of a housing project. If you're a developer in this room, you would think these numbers are amazing. Maybe they're not reflecting where we're at right now with interest rate, but this is Brick on Broadway. It's a housing project that it was presented to the DMC Corporation Board in 2021, and then with recommendations, then it moved to the City Council, and that's kind of the process. It goes through the DMC EDA Board. After that, it would go to the DMC Corporation Board, and then the City Council in order to get approval in 2021. And the project was completed in 2023. Opened for leasing in 2023. It's 180 apartments, workforce apartments, that they provide different levels of affordability. And it does have a 7,260 commercial space, access to transportation. There were several sustainability goals achieved, targeted business goals achieved, and you could see in the funding and the breakdown of that, that's how our local resources can come together in order to advance housing goals in our community. And if you haven't signed up for the housing tour yet, we will be touring Brick on Broadway later in one of the housing tours. And we also have a table, and we'll be more than happy to connect with you and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Wafa. My name is Lauren Jensen, and I'm the Energy and Sustainability Manager for the Destination Medical Center. And today I'm just going to review a few of our sustainable building elements and design guides that DMC and the city are really looking for in the projects and the developments that are happening here in Rochester. Some tools and resources in terms of tax credits and certifications, and then really our thermal energy network expansion that we're looking forward to building out and creating opportunity for developers here in Rochester. So with all of this growth, really puts Rochester in a unique spot to have the ability and the opportunity to make a healthy, sustainable city. healthy for human and our community, healthy economically, and healthy environmentally. And so in looking at this, it's across our districts, our streets and corridors, connecting to natural spaces, growing our urban forest, multimodal streets that prioritize pedestrians and bicycle and mass transit accommodations. And all of this has really been memorialized in our Unified Development Code, which Ryan will talk about a little bit later here this morning. And so specific to buildings, you'll see on the left side what our general requirements that we're looking for with developments, and that's meeting energy use intensity targets through the Minnesota SB 2030 guidelines, looking at construction and demolition, waste reduction and conversion in projects, water reduction within the building, water reduction within the irrigation of the building, including active transportation provisions such as bicycle parking or electric vehicle charging or prioritized spaces for green vehicles. Those third-party green certifications that really kind of encompass all of these elements and there's a variety to choose from that we can help decide and walk through. And then pursuing those applicable local utility incentives and really a lot of those federal now that came out through the Inflation Reduction Act. So over on the right-hand side, you'll see a list of tax credits that are now available to developers that really make achieving these sustainability guidelines financially feasible. And so just a quick example for one of those with the new energy efficient home credit, the 45L. For a multifamily home that meets certain Energy Star or Zero Energy Ready certifications, credits for that would range per unit of $500 to $5,000 that a developer would be eligible for. So a lot of potential to include these sort of sustainable building elements and still have a really economically feasible project. Next slide, please. And one particular project that we're really excited about here in Rochester is our thermal energy network, really decarbonizing buildings at scale. Right now, 73% of our community greenhouse gas emissions come from energy, and about half of that is because of natural gas in buildings. So how do we get buildings off of natural gas and electrify them? And that's really what this project here can do for us. It serves a variety of end-use markets. Think of a system of piping underground connecting multiple buildings in a downtown district, on a college campus, or a healthcare facility, all of those things that we have had and seen presented here today, so that those buildings can share the energy load between them. This creates economies of scale and it increases the efficiencies between them. It keeps our energy dollars local. And now with the Inflation Reduction Act and some of those tax credits, it's really buying down the cost of what it takes to implement these projects. And so the city has embarked on this journey with financial support from DMC as well to build out this map that you see as kind of our future phases of a thermal energy network line. So putting in that infrastructure that gives developers the opportunity to design a building in the way that we'd like to see it sustainably and just tap right into that system that's underground there. So next steps with this is really looking at these future locations. We took that first step in doing this for our municipal buildings, but there's a lot of available private development adjacent to those municipal buildings in these future possible extensions. So where are there opportunities for parcels to develop and tap into this? Looking at financial and operational models for a system like this. It is in a way a new mini utility that we would be setting up to run these systems. And then exploring policies and incentives that could support decarbonation on a broader scale, and hopefully in the future looking at residential models that could be applicable to this as well. Again, this is a really high-level overview of these things, and myself and city teammates will be at the resource table to help answer any questions and dive deeper into this. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jo Marie Morris, Executive Director of the Coalition for Rochester Area Housing. The Coalition is a cross-sector partnership of the Mayo Clinic, Rochester Area Foundation, City of Rochester, Olmsted County, and Destination Medical Center. Our mission is to collaborate, invest, and lead on innovative solutions to meet our community's housing needs. So it is about us all coming together. I can tell you that All the folks that are in this row here, I speak to very commonly, sometimes almost on a daily basis, about how we can collaborate and meet the needs, housing needs of our community. And, you know, Chow mentioned that she's a teacher and it's hard to speak 5 minutes. I'm a lawyer, just so you know. So here are some of the numbers about our needs. This comes from the Olmsted County Housing Analysis study that was done by Maxfield in 2020. We know that through 2030, we need about 2,080 housing units annually to meet our housing needs. We also know that in looking back in the last 3 to 4 years, we've only been producing about 1,000 units. So what that means is we need to double our efforts, right? And we all need to come together to do that, and that's precisely what we're doing. So I want to just talk about 3 of the coalition's initiatives. We have 5 priorities with the coalition, and again, those really come from that foundation of research that we received from the Maxfield study in 2020, and that is to increase our home ownership options, to increase the number of rental units available for those under 50% area median income, to increase our BIPOC home ownership levels, to preserve some of the units for affordable housing that we already have. And then the last one is really to increase all of our options for seniors. One of the things that we learned in the Maxfield study is that 1/3 of our demand here in Rochester is for senior housing of various types. So I'm going to give you some examples of some initiatives that we're working on right now actively with our partners. The first one is really kind of an initiative. The other thing I want to mention too is that all of these initiatives we do through an equity lens, right? So in consultation with WFA, DMC, with Chow, all of our teams are focused on equity. Rochester Area Foundation is doing a great job focusing on equity right now. So this first initiative I'm talking about touches on this community co-design project that you heard from Chow on. I was really fortunate about a year ago to participate in a community co-design project around BIPOC homeownership. And the facilitators were my friends Wafa and Chow. And we worked with 10 community members from diverse backgrounds to really help understand what are the opportunities and what are the challenges to homeownership for our BIPOC communities. And not only did we do that, we asked them, okay, what would your recommendation be? And what would those recommendations be to all the various stakeholders, right? It could be government, it could be financial institutions, it could be developers and the communities themselves. What can they do? And one of the recommendations they came back with was to do a mentorship program for BIPOC homeownership in the community. So the coalition is piloting a program with one of the other housing champions in our community, Three Rivers Community Action, and just launched a BIPOC homeowner mentorship program. There are currently 10 mentors from our community that have been successful homeowners that speak 5 different languages, that are working with 20 of our BIPOC community members that are interested in becoming and realizing the dream of homeownership in our community. So really, really excited about that initiative and moving that forward. Another initiative I wanted to talk to you about is that one of our priorities around providing multifamily rentals that are affordable in the community. And so with that, the coalition has done a notice of funding availability of up to $1.5 million to help with gap funding for low-income housing tax credit or projects that are going in front of Minnesota Housing Finance for funding in the Super RFP this year. That NOFA was launched, notice was given. The applications are due May 10th, and we'll have a decision on funding in the first week of June so that that commitment can be carried through to help with the points that you need for your application for Minnesota Housing. So that's what we're doing kind of in the rental space right now, along with many other things. The final initiative that I really wanted to talk with you about is something that we've seen one of the largest gaps in. I've only been with the coalition now for about 18 months, but one of the gaps that we've seen really in our community is the lack of entry-level modest homes for those first-time home buyers. And really, what I've also learned is that there's a whole continuum of housing, right? And to be successful in housing, we need to have all the pieces in place so that entry-level housing impacts that next step up for housing. And that next step up for housing, we've got the community land trust that provides a great half step to that first step of housing. So that whole continuum is so important. So right now the coalition is working with developers and providing 0% interest construction loans to build homes that are under $350,000. Other requirements for that is that they have to be for qualified purchasers that are 115% AMI or below. They have to keep the homes in home ownership, owner occupied for at least 5 years, not rented out. And I'm excited to tell you that we've already approved 2 different programs, one that will be providing 44 townhomes slab on grade for seniors, and another project that will be providing 65 single-family homes near Century High School. So very excited about that. But one of the things that we're really excited about is that many of our partners are doing things that are working with us to really leverage our tools together, right? So the City Council recently approved to move forward with funding what was a pilot program for waiving fees for home ownership. And so these developers are going to not only be able to pair our 0% interest construction loans, but also receive a waiver in some of the fees, depending on the size of the project, either upfront or in reimbursement later, to further reduce the cost of these homes. So we're really excited about those partnerships and really always talking about how we can work together to make those things happen. I think the theme that we've heard today and that I just really want to echo from Chancellor Carroll and from Deputy Administrator Cindy Steinhauser and everyone is that we are going to do this together, right? We are collaborating together and we're utilizing all our partners and all of our community partners and relationships to fund and use our financial policies that are at our fingertips to provide the most collective impact that we can to really move the needle on housing and for the benefit of our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I'm Jen Woodford. I have the pleasure of being part of the team at First Homes, working to provide affordable homeownership opportunities in our community. We really want to do our best as a community to make sure that everyone that wants to not just work here, be educated here, play here, but that they can also live here. And so we've been working really hard for 20 years to remove some barriers to homeownership. One of the primary ways that we do that is through our community land trust model. So we have 275 homes currently in our community land trust, about 7 counties, 35-mile catchment area. And this is a program that makes home ownership affordable to people at lower area median incomes. And Joe mentioned that earlier. Chow mentioned earlier that home ownership is not always, opportunities to home ownership is not always equitable in our community. And so we're really working hard to try to remove some of those barriers. So right now, area median income for Olmsted County, according to HUD and Minnesota Housing, is just under $99,000. So when we're looking at developing homes, we're trying to build homes that are affordable to people making $99,000 or less. Now, I will say that is our upper limit. That is you have to income qualify to buy a community land trust home, and that's the upper limit. But we've worked hard through lots of different partnerships. You've heard that word a lot today, and it's valuable every single time it's said. But we've worked so hard with different partnerships to lower that. In fact, typically our homeowners are between 55 and 65% of area median income. And how do we do that? We bring a subsidy to the table. And so every home in the Community Land Trust has subsidy that's brought to the table by First Homes. This could be in the form of donated land. It could be in the form of cash. It could be in the form of donated services. But right now, so far in 2024, our average subsidy into a home is about 25%, and that's about $70,000 per home. Not only does this bring the purchase price lower so that people who can qualify, maybe not for a $350,000 home, but maybe they can only qualify, maybe their highest mortgage amount is $200,000 or $215,000. We have homes available in that price point because of that subsidy. And again, not only is the price point for their mortgage lower, but because we have at least 20% into each home, the home buyer is able to avoid paying PMI. So we have 2024 so far, our year-to-date average sales price is $192,000 in the Community Land Trust. And of course, there's a wide range from $229,000 to $152,000. And of course, you can guess the higher priced homes are new construction homes. We have a variety, a mixture of new construction homes, and then we also do a fair amount of acquisition rehab. So we purchase homes that are available in our community that are affordable. A lot of time they might need some tender loving care, some funds invested in them, some significant rehab in terms of some cases. But those homes that we already have in our community, those naturally occurring affordable housing, you've heard NOAA used probably frequently, but that naturally occurring affordable housing is the most affordable housing that we're going to have in our community. And again, so far this year, we've had one home that we were able to sell to a new family for only $152,000. So the Community Land Trust is a shared equity model. So the homeowner owns their home outright. They have all the joys of homeownership. They pay their property taxes, they mow the lawn, they shovel their snow. Hopefully we're done with that so far for the year, but we'll see. And First Homes maintains a deeded interest in the land. So when I talk about that subsidy that comes along with the property, that's where we stay tied to the property, is in that subsidy amount and maintaining that deeded interest in the land. And when a homeowner buys their home, they do agree to a few things. They agree that they're going to pay us a ground lease fee of $25 a month. And again, that's just tying them continually month after month to First Homes. But they're also going to commit that the home has to be owner occupied. So these are not a rental opportunity. In fact, the ground lease specifically prohibits that you cannot rent out your Community Land Trust home. So there's a lot of things that tie you to our program while you own your home. And I would note that the average length of time that our homeowners own their home is about 7 years. So it does mirror a similar rate of homeownership as to market rate homes. But a lot of what you agree to when you join the Community Land Trust program is what happens when you go to sell your Community Land Trust home. So again, First Homes has invested about $70,000 into your home purchase, and you agree when you buy your home that you're going to sell your home, this Community Land Trust home, back within the First Homes program. So when it's time to sell, we have a realtor on our staff. She's sitting actually over there in the room with us today, and we guide you through the process. So there's a formula that exists for the price of your home that talks about how much your home can be sold for. And again, it's all based upon the initial subsidy of your home. You agree to share the equity with First Homes. And that's really important because that's how we preserve the affordability from one homeowner to the next. So we might invest 70, 80, even we have some homes we've invested $100,000 of subsidy in. And that seems like a lot for one unit. But the important thing to remember is that investment goes from this family to the next family and the next. We have some homeowners that have been part of the First Homes program for almost 20 years. And we've had other properties that have resold 3, 4, 5 times. And again, that subsidy stays with that home and keeps it affordable really in perpetuity. So when you go to sell, you split the equity with us. And what you're really splitting with us is the what we call the appraised equity. So you're going to build equity in your home as a homeowner when you pay your mortgage. And that, of course, is you've earned that. That earned equity is all yours as the homeowner. But when you go to sell your home, we do an appraisal. And if there's an increase in the appraised value and the appraised equity of your home, again, we split that with the current homeowner. And that's because, again, we've brought that subsidy to the table to make the home affordable, and there's no interest tied to that, or it's not a loan, it's a subsidy. But in order to keep that home affordable, we're going to need to split that equity with you, and it is a 50-50 split. And we at First Homes, we leave that equity split and that additional equity in the home so that it's affordable for the next homeowners. So how do we do this? If we're looking at anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 of subsidy per home, how can we possibly continue to do this and add 20 new homes per year? And it comes back to that partnership word. And at the very beginning, in Patrick Sieb's opening remarks, he said, well, you find people who have money and you find people who have sites and you put them together. And I kind of felt very seen, because that's exactly what we do. We have to find generous partners who have resources. We have to find land that's available. And we put the pieces of the puzzle together. And we're just one piece of the affordable housing puzzle, but that's how we make it work. So many of our partners are either up here on the stage or in the room: Minnesota Housing, the Coalition, Olmsted County, the city, DMC, other nonprofits, and so many more. And that's how we make it work. One of the other things we do to remove a barrier to home ownership is we do provide down payment assistance. So specifically for our community land trust homes, we have gap loans we provide. They are 0% interest, no payments, completely deferred as long as you own the home. And they're for our community land trust homes. So as long as you own that home, that gap loan is yours to utilize as well. So again, just one more way that we can make home ownership affordable. So thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Yetzer. I'm the Deputy Director of Community Development here for the City of Rochester. And I have the pleasure of trying to show how we can tie all of these great partnerships and programs that were just spoken before me together to bring a project to life. I helped lead the Unified Development Code process. This is something you've heard a couple times. Cindy mentioned it, Patrick mentioned it, others have mentioned it. That we started out in 2020. We set out to modernize our zoning standards, make them easier to understand, have all of the standards listed in one place, create a predictable process, which I'll touch on here in a moment. Others have mentioned it as well. We did present on this topic at the National APA Conference a week or so ago. It has received some pretty great coverage, which we're all very proud of. But I think, and I would just say that other cities have seen that and reached out and want to understand how we got to where we got to. And that's, I think, the point I want to hit on first is we're there. The thing that the folks in this room should be excited about is this isn't a project we're starting. This is a project we've finished. These are standards that are in place that you can use to capitalize on right now and bring your project to life. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to jump around a bit on this slide. All of these impact housing affordability and the creation of housing, but there's a couple of nuances that I want to touch on within that. First couple are pretty quick hitters. The reducing of the minimum lot size and the permitted ADUs or accessory dwelling units citywide. Neither of those are the silver bullet to solve affordable housing, but they're both an important piece to the project or to the puzzle of affordable housing. Artificial density limits. This is one for anyone who developed in Rochester previously, and I know a lot of other cities have a similar standard of a units per acre, which sort of indirectly sets what the unit size would be based on the size of your lot. We've removed that standard. We refer to that as an artificial density limit. There's no real reason that limit needs to be in there. We'll allow the market to decide the unit size. If you can meet all the other standards, we don't need that standard in there. Reducing parking, this is one, frankly, from the city perspective, this is one I feel like it becomes a non-issue for us, and it's quite interesting to then go to the national conference and hear about how many cities are still struggling with this. But we feel like we have more or less solved parking. We still have parking minimums, though they're very small, almost never become an issue. We have parking maximums, and then we have built-in flexibility at a staff level to help projects work through that. And then incentives and flexibility at a teammate level. Again, folks that have developed in Rochester will know that historically an incentive development process took likely 6 months, if not longer. And this is something that we've established. The incentives are clear. If you meet these incentives, you're awarded the bonus at a staff level. We don't need to go through 6 months worth of public hearings to achieve that. And likewise, flexibility at a staff level. There are things that we see commonly that may cause projects to sort of delay different standards, and we've worked hard to build in some flexibility for our team to work through those issues. I'm going to jump onto the next ones here, but I just want to make a plug. If you have questions about, no way can I cover everything in a zoning ordinance in 5 minutes, so if you have questions about zoning, I'll be available. We've got a team of folks up here at the table that can help answer questions or set up some time to talk about how any of those standards can impact your project. The next ones I want to talk about, diverse housing citywide and process predictability. I've saved these two for the end on purpose. Both of these had state legislation proposed this session, both of which don't appear to be moving forward, though it's never over till it's over. But I would just note that not almost all, but a vast majority of the policies that were put forth in those state bills, we've already adopted here in Rochester. So things like allowing residential housing in commercial districts. We did that through the UDC. We allow housing in all of our commercial districts. It increased our commercial zoning by almost 15% overnight. And that's something that has caused a lot of discussion statewide for good reason that should be discussed in detail with cities, but we've had those discussions and that's already in place. Process predictability. This is everything for us. This is something we harped on over and over and over again through the UDC process, and is something that is now taking the state stage when we talk about by right approvals. All of our zoning districts that allow for housing allow for by right approvals. If you meet our standards, there is no need for a public hearing to allow housing to move forward. And so we have those built in. I also want to touch on, some of my panelists here talk about equity. There's a major equity component to public hearings when it comes to housing. If you've not seen it, the American Association of Planning has put together an excellent equity guide that actually we helped participate in, and one of the authors wrote our zoning ordinance. And there's a huge component of equity within public hearings, and there are good reasons for pulling those out as much as possible when we're talking about housing projects. And so I just want to make that plug. Sorry, I just want to make sure I covered everything within that. The last thing I think I want to touch on is I've talked a lot about housing, but the UDC does this by right approvals for more than just housing. So there are other developers. Sorry, go back one slide still. One more. There are more than just housing developers in this room, and I want to emphasize that by right approvals are true in a lot of our zoning districts for a lot of different projects, not just housing. Housing is the one that everybody wants to talk about, and for good reason. But I just want to make that case that just because it's not a housing development, we still very likely have a by right approval process laid out for that project to move forward. The last thing I want to touch on, well, two things. I'll jump to this map here for a moment. It's just an interesting map to show. This is our R2X boundary. This is what we call our missing middle zone, or our infill and redevelopment zoning district. All of those dots on the map, those are missing middle units that were likely created before zoning got in the way. These are duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes that are already built, that were likely built before we then zoned them R1 and made them non-conforming. And now we've gone back on that, and with the creation of the R2X zoning district, these are all now by right approvals in these zoning districts. And so this is really bringing that missing middle to life. But the last thing I wanted to know before I go to the next slide is the zoning designation matters. And that is what I want to make the pitch to this room is everything that I've just said is true as long as you choose a zoning district to bring your project forward that allows for what we just talked about. State statute requires public hearings for zoning changes. So I can't give you a by right approval process if you're going to choose a zoning district that doesn't allow your project to move forward. Our team can certainly help you find out what those are, but I just want to emphasize that zoning matters and picking the right zoning district will make your project significantly easier. So now if you go to the next slide, when I talk about zoning districts, on the one side is the entire zoning map. I know this is hard to read, but I would challenge anybody in the room to make a zoning map interesting to show on a slide. So the left side is all of the city, and then on the right side is the TOD and R2X zoning districts. When I talk about picking the correct zoning district, and the downtown, when I talk about picking the correct zoning district, these are the correct zoning districts. These are where you should be looking if you're looking to do a missing middle project or a medium high scale residential project, or like I said, a non-residential project that's looking for a by right approval. These are the areas you should be targeting. I will point out, it should be on this map, it's not. The Destination Medical Center boundary essentially mirrors the downtown zoning, that gray box in the middle there, so I think that's important to point out. So now, just to bring this home, if you go to the next slide here, some projects that should get folks in this room excited. I'll walk through these very, very quickly. The brick project on the top left that you've heard a lot about, 180 units created with affordability aspects. No public hearings required for that project. There was, because of some subsidies, there was public hearings related to the financing piece of it, but in terms of entitlements, no public hearings required. Benaya, which is the project next to that, 27 units created in our transit-oriented development zoning districts, not a single public hearing included on that project. YMCA, which the name of that project now is escaping me in the bottom right there, 219 units, no public hearings required. They may have had a public hearing for an easement vacation, but that, again, that's not an entitlement one necessarily. The Bishop project on the left there, 112 units, no public hearings. There was a plat that needed to be done, but in terms of entitlements, no public hearings. On to the next slide. Missing middle housing, downtown cottages is the top left there. This is 4 cottage homes that are being built on a lot that previously had 1 unit on it. No public hearing required for that project. The legacy row homes in the bottom right there, again, I talk about zoning district mattered. This one needed a zone change, and that is what slowed this one down the most. Once the zoning was in place, no further public hearings required. 12 row homes created on that one. First Homes Row Homes in the top right, great partner, great project. 6 units created there, again, no public hearings. And then on the bottom left, 1274plex is what we refer to as that one. 4 units on a larger corner lot in that R2X zoning district, and again, no public hearing required. So these are what we're talking about when we say by right approvals and things that I think the folks in this room should get really excited about if this is a project you're looking to bring forward. And with that, I will hand it back to Catherine. Thank you.
So we're going to do a real lightning round, second panel here with some other great organizations that we're hoping you'll be excited to hear what they have to share with us. And then we will be breaking for lunch right outside these doors. And then the tours will commence. We're still shooting to commence at 1 with the tours. And you can have 2 options. So we're doing a 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock and a 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And I'll run through them real quick so you can start thinking about if you haven't already signed up. There'll be a Link Bus Rapid Transit tour that takes you out to the West Transit Village project. That will be a bus meeting outside of the convention center here. There's a walk around the footprint of the Bold Forward Unbound initiative. We're going to take a tour over to the riverfront and see that small area plan and where that will be happening. A discovery walk to Discovery Square if you're interested in the Biomedtech Innovation District. That's one you'll definitely want to see. And then, as Wafa mentioned, there is a housing tour of the Brick and the UMR student housing that was the conversion from the Doubletree. And so those are your options. And with that, we'll get started with this panel. And the order will You're already in the perfect order. All right, this is going to be a real lightning round. If you guys can speed as quickly as possible. And then again, we hope this just spurs future conversations, mixing and mingling at lunch and afterwards. So with that, Kate, I'll hand it to you.
Great. Thank you. My name is Kate Speed. I'm with LISC, which stands for Local Initiative Support Corporation. We appreciate the opportunity to be invited to this. We are exploring expansion into the Rochester area, so I'm going to tell you about some of the tools and resources that we have available. So LISC is a community development financial institution, or what's called a CDFI. I often tell folks we function a lot like a nonprofit bank. We were started in the late 70s by the Ford Foundation, and it was really about bringing capital into communities where there was gaps in the system between the private market and the kind of government and public subsidies that were out there. We as an organization, we're based in New York, and we have 39 local offices across the country, including in Duluth and the Twin Cities. I am with the Twin Cities team, and then we also have a rural presence that covers 2,400 counties across the country. So we're in 44 states and Puerto Rico, so we have quite a big footprint across the country. We have invested $30 billion nationally, plus another $20 billion through our affiliates, which is a low-income housing tax credit equity fund and a new markets tax credit program, as well as a kind of a mission investment fund management. And these investments collectively have helped create about 490,000 affordable homes and over 80 million square feet of commercial and community space. LISC also supports really a comprehensive set of strategies. So we support community health centers, healthy food projects, small businesses, child care centers, charter schools, safe places for kids to play, kind of everything that a healthy community encompasses. So in the Twin Cities office, which is where I'm at, we hit $1 billion last year in the history of our investments. So a lot of folks know LISC for our financial investments. We do grants, loans, and equity investments. But we also provide a lot of technical assistance and management support to community developers. And we really serve as a bridge between kind of the private finance system and the public funders, and then the community partners on the ground. I'll just quick mention a couple of our local priorities in the Twin Cities, and one of these is one of the conversations we're having with folks in the Rochester area as well. So the first one there, though, is cultural district recovery. A big focus over the last couple of years has been working in the areas that were hardest hit by the pandemic and the civil unrest after George Floyd's murder. So there's a big priority for BIPOC and local ownership of real estate in those places, and that's been a lot of what my time has been focused on. We're also trying to stand up a statewide housing fund to expand the supply of affordable housing. The focus there would be Duluth, Twin Cities, and possibly Rochester in that fund. That would be flexible, affordable patient capital for kind of affordable and mixed income housing, ownership and rental housing. We've had a really interesting program around emerging developer capacity over the last 2 years. I've already talked to a couple of folks in the room about this one. So this is about bringing new folks in the community development space, primarily small emerging for-profit developers, into this community development and affordable housing system, and trying to help them access the resources, public dollars that are out there, and all these other technical resources, in fact, that my colleagues will be talking about as well. And that we're in our second cohort. We'll be going into our third cohort this year. And that's been a really successful program. And then the last thing I'm mentioning here is around supporting community ownership models. We heard about land trust. That's a big focus of our work on the capacity building side, and also supporting cooperatives. And then the last thing I'll say, I'm sorry, I'm talking so fast, trying to get folks to lunch, is that LISC was part of a coalition called Power Forward Communities that received $2 billion from the Greenhouse Gas Emission Fund. A couple weeks ago, the awards were announced. So we're really excited to try to plug into those dollars and make sure that Minnesota receives some of those resources. Thank you. Happy to talk always about our work and where we can plug in with folks.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Wes Johnson. I'm Chief Underwriter and Senior Loan Officer at Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, or GMHF. We are also a CDFI, similar to LISC, and our mission is to support the creation of strong communities and affordable homes through strategic investments and effective partnerships. We're dedicated to social and racial justice and committed to advancing solutions that support equity for communities of color throughout Minnesota. We were established in 1996 by the McKnight Foundation and Blandon Foundation to work in greater Minnesota outside of the Twin Cities metro. However, we are now serving all 87 counties in Minnesota with our financing products. My contact information is on the screen. We have a resource table in the lobby. I'll be there after lunch to talk with anybody who wants to learn more. You can go to the next slide. We have a family of social impact funds. We do about $200 million per year of activity within these funds, including equity investments, lending, grant making, and we provide technical assistance. So we're one of the organizations who may have money available for your project. Our primary role is as a CDFI lender, so that's providing loans and technical assistance to increase access to capital and create and preserve affordable housing. We do about $100 million a year of lending. We provide competitive interest rates and pricing with beneficial terms. We can often do discounted pricing for projects that meet specific priorities that we have as an organization. And our loan products really can support projects at all stages of the development process, including acquisition, pre-development, construction, long-term permanent financing, mezzanine financing to help take the place of some of the equity that might be needed to get your project completed. And we try to think creatively and help leverage more capital at a lower cost to make all of our scarce resources go a little bit farther. We also have the Minnesota Equity Fund, which invests tax credit equity into affordable projects that are funded with low-income housing tax credits, and the NOAA Impact Fund, which invests equity into the preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing in the Twin Cities metro area. And then we provide a limited amount of grant making, about $1 million annually. We do have a couple of areas where grants will be available this year, and the first of those is for emerging developers of color in greater Minnesota, so outside of the Twin Cities. So those grants can be used for pre-development costs. If an emerging developer of color has identified a project and it's moving forward and they need a little bit of funding to keep them on the right path and do some initial feasibility or pay for some of those early costs. And then we're also piloting a green cost share program that can help pay for some of the costs of environmentally friendly improvements to buildings or green features with new construction, and that's in partnership with the Center for Energy and Environment, and it's up to $50,000 per project. It may end up being about 4 or 5 projects this year. And then we frequently play multiple roles in any given project, so it might be someone who receives a pre-development grant or pre-development loan from us. We help with the acquisition of the site. We fund the construction and pay for costs during construction. We provide a permanent loan and equity to the project. So we try to be a one-stop shop for affordable housing financing where possible. One of our priorities is to play a role in financing mixed income housing with low subsidy, and we can provide first mortgages and construction financing and mezzanine loans for those projects to help reduce the amount of owner equity required for them. We've done a few of them and want to identify more of those projects. I think Rochester is a good community to where those projects can be feasible with a little public subsidy. And so really, I just encourage you to connect with me directly if you have a project that you want to talk about, and we can work through it together. Give me a call or shoot me an email, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. My name is Lynette Dumalag. I'm a broker, and I founded a firm last year called CDU Perot, but I am here as ULI's District Council Chair. And I see many friends and folks that are involved in ULI, and grateful to see you down here and hopefully make new friends as well. So I shared that I'm a broker and I'm the chair, but I also have a side gig, and that is St. Louis Park City Council. Yes, I'm also in the policy-making space. I door knocked a number of people. They said yes, and here I am in an elected position. So yeah, I hear someone laughing. So props to anyone working in public policy. Oh, it's a tough time. But I mention this because ULI is a great space for those to gather and convene. Again, my background is in brokerage. I'm usually looking at a developer and saying, your rent is too high. Or I'm on city council and I say, a developer again asking for this, and what incentives do you want? And those are spaces in which there's natural tension that occurs, but ULI is a place where we can learn together. There's not an ask that you're asking me specifically, but we might be learning about decarbonization. We might be learning about how to have more housing attainability in a space that isn't contentious, and we're here to make our communities better. So if you go to the next slide. So as Megan shared earlier, ULI is a multidisciplinary nonprofit organization. We are global. There's thousands of people within the ULI network, both nationally and internationally. Great. And we have Connect, Inspire, and Lead. These are words that you can read on the screen. But I will share with you 3 global initiatives that we have at ULI. The first one is decarbonization and net zero. The second one is housing attainability. And the third one is educating and nurturing the next generation of diverse leaders. Fantastic, big global ideas. So as my friends in politics say, all politics is local. So what do we do here locally? We have about 550 members. We are a board of 15 volunteer members. There are some folks that are in public policy space. There are some folks that are brokers. There's some bankers. There are some developers, and there are some designers. All here working towards creating policy for the organization and then executing on delivering a great platform for our members, and with support from staff like Megan. So I'll just briefly talk about some of the things that ULI is known for, and I'll call out some friends in the room because you can actually talk to them and say, what's your experience? So product councils, so the cohort networks, these are peer-to-peer learning. You might be part of a product council because you do development. You might be part of a product council because you do community development. Some of these spaces are created for you to share ideas and make sure that you're sharing knowledge in a space where others might not have visibility into it. I see Dan Collison back there. I think he's part of Market, and I know Paul Johnson with Nelson NTH. He was in the room here. He probably left. And Ned Doddington, I believe you're on a product council as well. So you can talk to some of those folks and ask them about their experience as well. YLG, this is a young leaders group. This is professionals that are 35 and under from a variety of sectors. We have GK, she's the head of YLG. It's like I pick them and where I should put them to sit. And so that's a group that they're learning together. They might share like, how do I make the next move in my career? We have next, 35 and plus. And so folks like Ned, I'm calling him out a lot. He's part of that cohort. And again, these are networks that are for people of similar frames. So moving on along the spectrum, we have a READY. So READY is a cohort model where we're training the next generation of diverse leaders. We have women and people of color that are part of that cohort. We have Ivan Alvarado, who's on the steering committee over here and a former alum. And then we have Mike Atlas, who is also here and ready to learn, and we're doing the work to create a new pipeline of leaders. Also, wonderful program, we have Urban Plan. So this is where people get to pretend to be developers, and they pretend to pitch to city council members. And so we train people, and sometimes we have programs where city council pretends to be developers and figure out how to city council get a project off and running. And so these are programs in which we train people like, you got to think like a developer. These are how things pencil. So one thing that I will want to mention, 2 things I want to mention, the housing policy work group. I know the previous panel talked about the missing middle. We have some folks that are working in that space. Those were cohort models that we learned and shared from people who are actually doing that work. And then our key mark, one of the things that we're known for is the technical advisory panel. So what that program does is a city or a public entity says, I have a parcel of land, I don't know what to do with it. We got to figure out what's what. So they'll hire us, and we'll put together a panel of folks that are going to look at it, that have no interest in the land whatsoever, and then give their opinion on what we should do if you're trying to solve for these things. The last TAP that we ran, we had 2 members. Catherine was part of it, and Ned was also part of it. Now you're getting less shout-outs. And it was around the warehouse district in downtown Minneapolis, 6 blocks. We've got a terrible vacancy rate in downtown Minneapolis. We have opportunities to reimagine some of our spaces. We have a crime problem. So what did we do? We had 3.5 days where we had people locally and nationally to come and take a look at the space and say, what can we do and what are the recommendations we can submit to Minneapolis. So I did a broad spectrum of things that we have available, and we're available here for questions and hope to see you soon.
Okay, we're almost there. My name is Kelly, and I'm representing ArtSpace today. And I wanted to, for those of you who aren't familiar with ArtSpace, I wanted to give you a really brief background of who we are and also discuss how we work in new community. We have a bit of a unique approach as a developer. And then really high level mention some of the mechanics of how our projects work, which hopefully will spur some questions and conversation later on. So our origin story, we were actually founded by the city of Minneapolis back in 1979, really in response to the artists being priced out of the warehouse district. So while the artists and the creatives were the catalyst for interest and investment in this area, they also quickly became the victims of pricing affordability. So in the early years of ArtSpace, we played more of a broker's role between the city, landlords, artists, making sure that they were still downtown. And after a number of years as that kind of function, our board realized that this Soho effect, as it's now called and happens all over the country, needed to have a more proactive approach to addressing and preserving affordability. So that's when in the late 80s we became our own nonprofit. So we're a nonprofit developer. You can go to the next slide, please. And our mission is to create, foster, and preserve affordable space for artists, their families, and art organizations and creative businesses. And we do this by not only developing the spaces, but also being the owners and the stewards of those buildings long term so that we can really ensure that they are indeed staying affordable in their market. So how do we work? How do we enter into community? So something that makes us unique is that we work upon invitation into a community. And one of the roles that I get to play is having those initial conversations, which is really fun. Usually the story is from someone from the city or from a community foundation or kind of a economic development association in the city, acknowledging the pricing, the housing crisis, but also that it's potentially most hard-hitting for their artists and the creatives. So we speak with them about how a potential project that we could offer has a variety of catalytic benefits for the community. And we do this by engaging first in a preliminary feasibility study, where from the onset, we're working with a core group of cross-sector representation from the city. So it's rather from the community. So it's folks from the city, economic development, housing. We've had council members be a part of core groups, and also other potential larger institutional partners. So healthcare systems, education systems have had representation in core groups. And then, of course, having the movers and the shakers from the arts community, both from the larger institutions as well as some who are tapped into more of the underground scene. And with this core group, we work to hold a number of different engagements in the community. And all of this is really framed around the 6 components that you see on the screen. So we're holding a focus group with arts and arts organizations to understand, of course, what kinds of disciplines exist in this community and make this community unique, but also what kinds of spaces are missing. Everything from housing to shared creative spaces, performing arts spaces, private studio spaces. We want to really understand both what's already there and working really well and what models are serving the community, but what's missing. We're going to hold a focus group with civic leaders and funding and financing partners to really understand what are the priorities from the city, what are the projects that are in the pipeline, and also what are the kinds of resources that could go into a project. And then we are also going to hold a focus group that we call Equity in Space. And this is again with artists and creatives, but those who have historically been left out of real estate conversations. So those that may carry historically marginalized identities, and people who have a perspective on the underserved population in the community. And then we're also going to hold a public meeting where we really want to get at what are the broader community goals that could align with an arts-based style project. So these can be everything from residential density or sustaining creative businesses, incubating businesses. This could be about revitalizing downtown or transit-oriented development. So we really want to collect some information around, again, how can an arts-based style project be catalytic and complementary to everything else that's happening in that local ecosystem. During this initial phase, we will look at sites, but you may be surprised to hear that the site component is the least important at this stage in the game. We really want to build and have a better understanding of what kind of project concept is viable here and is relevant, and then find that kind of site that will align all the priorities, the resources, where artists want to be in your community in that way. And I think we can move forward to the next slide. So that's our initial engagement in the community, and I just wanted to give a quick some stats on kind of how these things function. So typically our model, we like to say if you've seen one arts-based project, you've seen one arts-based project, because they really reflect both architecturally the region that they're in, but also in terms of the mix of spaces, combination of the housing component with the commercial component. It all comes together through the pre-development process and our understanding of the community. That said, kind of if I had to give you a typical model, it is a mixed-use development. A typical project for us, it averages about 50 units of live-work housing, flexibly designed for artists and their families to live, but also have a place to make and create. And then some combination of creative amenities, things like a dance studio within the building, flexible spaces that can be galleries, it can be pop-up demonstrations, it can be small performance space, and then some affordable commercial space, where we really hope that our anchor tenant in that space is going to be a local creative business or an arts organization or representation from an arts council or arts service organization for the community. And typically, our projects from a housing standpoint serve the 30 to 80% area median income. In places like Colorado, where affordability is skyrocketing, we are going up to things like 120 in terms of the AMI. And our main equity going into our projects is the low-income housing tax credit program. We also utilize other historic tax credits when relevant. So again, you'll see in our projects that we do everything from new construction, infill, historic renovation, you name it, we've probably done it. And lastly, I think it's important to call out too, especially for city folks in the room, that our projects do pay property taxes. Even though we're a nonprofit, they do contribute back to the tax roll and are really become, again, a catalytic project for a neighborhood and for a city. And lastly, I just want to mention too that as an organization, we have a consulting arm where we also work one-on-one with arts organizations to help them advance their own space-related projects and to help fill the technical assistance gap and the capacity gap that a lot of organizations who are growing might lack. So I would be happy to talk lots more about this, and also happy to set up tours for any of our Minnesota projects if you're interested. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. And please join me in thanking all of our panelists. I really appreciate your being here. All right. So that concludes this sort of formal part of this morning's programming. And so we have lunch outside, and I hope you will come and mix and mingle and have further conversations. And then the tours. And then we disperse for the day. So please make new connections, build on old ones. And thank you again for being here today.